Catch Me If You Can, the epic origin tale of the first computer virus and its secret life on floppy disks. When people speak about computer-borne plagues today, they imagine invisible packets racing down fiber lines or malicious links in an email. In truth, the first epidemic that fit the modern definition of a computer virus hitchhiked inside pockets, briefcases, and school backpacks. It lived on thin sheets of flexible magnetic oxide, and it spread as fast as human curiosity could pass a disk from one pair of hands to the next. This is the story of how that tiny program was conceived, how it escaped, the strange places it reached, and the arms race it triggered, told in one continuous narrative. Tables dissolved and facts folded directly into the plot. An idea is born in the chalk dust of 1949. Picture a lecture hall at the University of Illinois just after World War II. John von Neumann, the polymath who helped design both the atomic bomb and the first stored program computer, is sketching grids on a blackboard. He argues, against the intuition of many peers, that even in a purely mathematical universe made of symbols, it is possible to devise a machine that carries a blueprint of itself and methodically builds a replica. The audience regards the thought experiment as a logical curiosity. No one walks out imagining the nightmare of self-copying code running wild on real machinery, because in 1949, most of the world's computers can be counted on two hands, and none are connected to one another. The Creeper slithers through the ARPANET, 1971. Fast forward 22 years. The Cold War has funded an experimental network linking research mini-computers at universities and government labs. The machines are DPDP-10s running 10x, their operators proud to be pioneers on a thing called ARPANET. Bob Thomas at Bolt, Beranek and Newman writes a short program as a proof of concept. When executed, it moves itself to another PDP-10 across the network, prints, "I'm the Creeper, catch me if you can" on the remote teletype, then deletes the original copy. Ray Tomlinson, freshly famous for inventing the user-at-host email syntax, tweaks Thomas's stunt so that each hop leaves the old instance intact. For the first time, bits reproduce themselves on their own initiative. The moment captures every ingredient that will define future outbreaks: an initial host, a communications pathway, and code whose primary purpose is replication. Administrators, irritated by the prank, cobble together the earliest antivirus tool they can imagine. Another self-propagating program named Reaper that seeks and deletes Creeper wherever it finds it. The duel is short-lived and confined to a few dozen hosts, yet the precedent is set. Self-copying software is no longer a Gedanken experiment. It is a living phenomenon. SneakerNet, the human network stronger than wires. Throughout the late 1970s, personal computing explodes. What had been refrigerator-sized mainframes guarded by technicians becomes color-screened Apple IIs in middle school labs and emerging IBM PCs on office desks. Modems exist, but are slow and costly. Most files, games, shareware utilities, homework programs written in BASIC move the old-fashioned way. People carry them. A box of 5¼ floppy disks sits next to nearly every keyboard. Each disk is thinner than a magazine's back cover, holds an entire game, and is ready to be written the moment the metal sleeve slides away from its oval eye. Nobody thinks twice about popping one disk after another into the only drive labeled A. That culture of physical exchange, sometimes cheekily nicknamed SneakerNet, is precisely the ecological niche that the first wild microcomputer virus will exploit. 4 Elk Cloner, a high school joke with continental reach. In early 1982, a 9th grader named Rich Skrenta, bored during winter in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, decides to surprise friends in the local Apple II user group. He crafts a tiny 400-byte routine that he injects into the boot sector of a pirated game disk. Apple DOS, trusted and naive, always loads whatever sits in Sector 0 the instant the computer starts. Skrenta's loader copies itself into the machine's memory, then leans back and waits. If the user later inserts a clean disk that is not write protected, the loader relocates the original boot code to another sector and writes a clone of itself into the now vacant track 0 Sector 1. For 49 boots, nothing visible happens. On boot number 50, the screen clears and a short poem scrolls upward. Elk Cloner, the program with a personality. It will get on all your disks, it will infiltrate your chips. Friends laugh, then groan. then realize every piece of software they own now carries the poem. Over the next several weeks, copies of the infected game leapfrog from Pennsylvania to Ohio, then to California, then overseas with a college exchange student. Because the Apple II has no hard drive, the virus cannot survive a power-off except on the disk itself. But that is enough. Decades later, security historians will look back and describe Elk Cloner as the first virus that lived and bred freely in the wild on personal computers. 5. Why floppy disks made perfect incubators. Diskette culture in the 1980s offers 4 irresistible advantages to a would-be parasite. Instant execution. Both Apple DOS and MS-DOS blindly run whatever occupies the boot sector. Default vulnerability. The little write protect notch is almost always uncovered. Protecting it requires sliding a plastic tab or sticking opaque tape over the hole, and users rarely bother. Copy fever. Games, clip art, and shareware circulate hand-to-hand at schoolyards, user group meetings, and small business offices. Duplication is celebrated, not frowned upon. No security infrastructure. Early operating systems lack privilege separation, code signing, or even basic checksum utilities. The concept of scanning a disk is alien. Where a network worm depends on coax cables and routers, the floppy virus depends on the trust and enthusiasm of humans. Ironically, the more people enjoy sharing software, the healthier the virus's ecosystem grows. MER6 boot sector sorcery, the technique revealed. A floppy drive on power-up drags the read head to track 0 and loads the very first sector into memory before operating system files are even considered. Virus authors realize that they can hijack this sacred space with a 2-step sleight of hand. Relocate the real loader, they copy the authentic boot code to an unused sector elsewhere on the disk, typically the last track because DOS never checks there. Install a preloader. A miniature routine, often under 5 or 12 bytes, goes into sector 0. On each boot, it first infects any mountable disk in drive A, then jumps to the relocated original so the system appears normal. From that moment, every time the compromised computer starts, it behaves like a printing press, stamping identical forgeries onto every blank it sees. A user who wonders why some companion's word processor disk suddenly shows 1 less free kilobyte never suspects a hidden stowaway. 7. Brain, 2 brothers, 1 boot sector, and a planet-wide infection. January 1986. In Lahore, Pakistan, brothers Basit and Amjad Farooq Alvi run a tiny business selling heart monitor software for the IBM PC. They are frustrated that travelers from Britain keep buying one legitimate copy and duplicating it for friends back home. In retaliation, Basit writes a boot sector program that monitors whether the disk it lives on is an uncertified duplicate. If so, the code brands the disk with a short manifesto, "Welcome to the dungeon, 1986 Brain," and quietly copies itself onto the machine's floppy drive. The Alvi brothers assume the code will remain a local nuisance, and they print their office telephone number in the boot sector so pirates can come pay for a legal copy. Within months, the phone begins ringing from as far away as California. To Basit's astonishment, what he intended as copy protection has become the first IBM PC virus of real consequence. Brain rides in the pockets of international businessmen, in the jacket sleeves of foreign students, even tucked between conference handouts at medical device trade shows. By mid-1987, it has circled the globe, inaugurating the DOS-era malware age, and inspiring John McAfee and other entrepreneurs to form the first commercial antivirus outfits. Brain's success teaches 3 lessons in one stroke. Standard hardware creates a huge target population. A virus does not have to be destructive to be disruptive, and embedding contact information in malicious code guarantees press coverage, which in turn guarantees notoriety. 8. The pre-internet superhighway, BBSs and copy parties. Although floppies remain the prime mover, telephone-based bulletin board systems start to act as accelerants. A hobbyist dials a local number, uploads a newly cracked game to the public file area, and logs off. Another user 14 states away, scanning for wares at 2 in the morning, downloads the file through a whistling 2400 baud modem. If the upload carries Brain or a file infector called Cascade, the infection now skips hundreds of kilometers in a single dial tone. On weekends, regional copy parties let 30 enthusiasts string disk copy stations in a daisy chain, cloning dozens of titles at once. A single Trojan placed early in the evening can emerge 12 hours later on 200 exit disks headed for half a dozen cities. Ironically, the same BBS network that spreads infection also spreads the first cures. Shareware scanners such as Verscan or fprot are themselves uploaded to file sections under headers like Virus Fix Get Fast. SysOps sees the chance to look responsible, even heroic, by posting the latest definition update next to yesterday's batch of brand new games. Bun 9 an arms race in 3 acts. Act 1. Manual Vigilance, 1982 to 1985. During the Elk Cloner years, defense is manual and often desperate. A technically savvy user might own a sector editor, an application that lets her peer into the raw hexadecimal tracks of a floppy. If she notices that Sector 0 looks suspiciously different from her known good system disks, she can copy the healthy bootloader over the infection. Most people, however, rely on superstition. Never boot from an unfamiliar disk, flip the Write Protect tab once a game is stable, and hope for the best. Act 2. Signature Scanners, 1986 to 1990. After Brain proliferates, entrepreneurs spring into action. John McAfee releases Scan.exe. Peter Tippett promotes CPAV. A young Eugene Kaspersky assembles his own pattern-matching engine in Moscow. Each product ships with a text file containing dozens, eventually hundreds, of hexadecimal byte strings. The scanner reads every .exe, .com, or boot sector, looking for matches. The approach brings comfort to business managers who crave a checkbox labeled virus protection. But the system's weakness emerges quickly. Any new strain whose code does not appear in last month's definition list slips past undetected. Act 3. Heuristic Guardians and TSR Vaccines, 1991 to 1995. As file infectors such as Jerusalem and boot sector clones like Michelangelo draw headline anxiety, vendors embed resident vaccine programs. A terminate and stay resident utility loads at boot, hooks into DOS's in13H disk service, and intercepts any attempt to write to Sector 0 or append bytes to an executable. The vaccine barks a warning, sometimes blocking the write outright. Users complain that these guardians slow machines and occasionally flag legitimate installation routines. Grumbling notwithstanding, corporate IT departments begin forcing every workstation to load a TSR shield on login. By 1993, daily or weekly virus definition updates arrive via modem, an early analog of today's cloud-delivered endpoint protection. 10. Notable outbreaks that rode the floppy highway cascade. 1987. Born in Germany, this file infector encrypts its own body so that static patterns cannot find it easily. On every Friday the 13th, it triggers a playful yet alarming screen effect. One by one, the letters on the monitor fall downward, piling up at the bottom like leaves. Cascade leaps from a Hanover Computer Fair demo disc to American university labs within a semester, proving how porous academic exchange truly is. Stoned, 1987. A New Zealand college student's prank simply displays, "Your computer is now stoned on boot," but its durability makes it legendary. Variants spawn worldwide. One offshoot, Stoned Empire Monkey B, emerges in the mid-1990s and rewrites partition tables so stealthily that even dedicated boot sector scanners struggle to dislodge it. Michelangelo, 1991. Perhaps the most infamous boot virus of the DOS era, it lies dormant until 6th of March, the Renaissance artist's birthday, then overwrites the first 100 cylinders of any hard drive it occupies. The media predict millions of casualties. In reality, tens of thousands of machines fall, but corporate America receives a bracing lesson. Unchecked floppy use can destroy data en masse. Concept, 1995. Technically not a floppy-first pathogen, yet absolutely born of the same culture, Concept hides inside the default Word template normal ... At the time, offices shuffle Word documents on both disks and brand new email attachments. Many infections therefore start with a disk handoff in a meeting room and spread further when the recipient forwards the file to a colleague across the country. Every outbreak reinforces the same public health principle. An epidemic's speed is the product of human sharing habits, not network bandwidth. The vector evolves from Mylar disks to email attachments to USB flash drives, but the hand that passes the medium from one machine to another remains the indispensable accomplice. 11. The disks may die, but the idea lives on. By 1995, the World Wide Web begins to eclipse dial-up BBSs. By 1998, Most new PCs ship with CD-ROM drives and optional 56K modems. By 2000, the floppy itself starts to look quaint. Yet floppy-born wisdom shapes every security default that follows. Microsoft disables floppy boot in BIOS unless the user toggles it on. Later, when USB drives become popular, Windows still auto-executes code via the autorun.inf mechanism, an unintentional homage to Sector Zero. Only after high-profile worms use thumb drives to jump air gaps, most notoriously Stuxnet in 2010, does Windows finally disable autorun by default. Industrial systems tell a different story. Assembly lines, medical scanners, point-of-sale registers, and even some nuclear facilities keep DOS or Windows 3.x alive far into the new millennium because the software just works. These legacy boxes, isolated from the internet, receive updates via whatever port they still possess, often a floppy drive. A careless technician who brings an ancestral disk from the junk drawer may, in 2015, reintroduce stoned EmpMon-B into a factory that manufactures car parts for the 21st century. 12. Cultural ripples and the birth of an industry. The term virus itself, borrowed from microbiology by researcher Fred Cohen in a 1984 academic thesis, leaps from jargon to household word only after journalists write sensational pieces about Brain, Cascade, and Michelangelo. The epidemiological metaphor sticks so thoroughly that 30 years later, security professionals still talk about infection rates, payloads, and quarantine. Commercially, each outbreak translates into new market demand. John McAfee's company sells disk-based scanners via mail order, complete with printed definition updates that customers manually type into configuration files. Peter Tippett licenses CP to IBM, bringing antivirus code onto millions of desktops overnight. Eugene Kaspersky begins by cataloging Moscow's first DOS viruses on a Soviet clone of the IBM PC. 3 decades later, his surname fronts a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, defending everything from smartphones to oil pipelines. Legally, the world adapts too. In the United States, Congress revises the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in 1990, declaring that the creation or distribution of malicious code that causes damage constitutes a federal offense, even if the author never intended harm. Basit and Amjad Alvi, meanwhile, become folk legends. Early 21st century security conferences often invite them to recount how their homemade copyright trap inadvertently birthed an industry. 13. A chronological glide, from theoretical curiosity to global menace. 1949, von Neumann's lectures on self-replicating automata lay the theoretical groundwork. 1971, Creeper and Reaper prove that code can roam autonomously across network mainframes. 1982, Elk Cloner invades Apple II floppy culture, demonstrating wild propagation without any network. 1986, Brain introduces the PC world to boot sector infection and sparks the first antivirus businesses. 1987, Cascade, Jerusalem, and Stoned show that file infection and playful payloads add staying power. 1991, Michelangelo delivers a scare large enough to institutionalize daily scanning and write protect discipline. 1995, Concept Macrovirus bridges physical media and the young email frontier, hinting at how future malware will ride combined vectors. By the time broadband eclipses floppy drives, the foundational narrative arc, replication, vector, payload, countermeasure, has already played out in miniature on spinning plastic disks. Physical media never truly vanish. USB, SD cards, and smart device firmware updates still depend on removable storage. If a boot sector virus could live in 512 bytes on a floppy, imagine what fits in the hundreds of megabytes many devices will blindly execute during an update. The friendliest habits can be dangerous. In the 1980s, sharing software was an act of generosity. It doubled as the perfect infection channel. Modern equivalents, cloud storage links, code snippets pasted into chats, inherit the same dual role. Security is reactive until culture changes. Each technological leap, from floppies to email to macros to USB autorun, wins mass adoption first, then is retrofitted with protections only after the first spectacular breach. Storytelling shapes defense. The metaphor of viruses and immunization born during those early epidemics still guides user education campaigns and budget discussions. A good story moves policy more reliably than a dry audit ever will. 15. Epilogue. The echo in every thumb drive. Nearly half a century separates von Neumann's chalk diagrams from from the solid-state drives humming inside today's laptops. Yet each time you plug a stranger's USB key into your computer and your operating system flashes a warning about scanning for harmful software, you are reenacting the drama of a Pennsylvania teenager's poem and two Pakistani brothers' dungeon greeting. What began as 400 bytes of trickster code on a flexible diskette gave birth, step by accidental step, to a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity industry and to a permanent subplot in the human story. Whenever we invent a way to share information, some fragment of that information will learn to share itself in ways we never intended. So the next time you see an alert pop up that says a file has been quarantined, take a moment to remember the whisper from 1971, "Catch me if you can." The chase never really ended, it just switched vehicles. The floppy disk is gone, but the virus is still running, this time on wheels that fit in a port the size of a thumbnail.